In the streets of Chicago, another rebellion was taking place. Young people from all over the country had been arriving in the city. They had come to demand an end to the war. Coordinating the demonstrations was a coalition of peace groups, led by veteran pacifist David Dellinger. As Monday blurred into Tuesday, tensions in the hall escalated, and the fighting between the demonstrators and police intensified.
The police officers saw order as their job. The protesters saw disorder as their goal. Both sides worked themselves up to get angrier and angrier.
The Chicago policemen who were in the streets of Chicago were from blue-collar families. They didn't have any opportunities to go to college. And I think those Chicago police officers didn't understand why these kids, the sons and daughters of the affluent, were out in the streets trying to wreck the system.
I felt that they were just young students that had very little life behind them and a lot of life in front of them, and they were easily swayed, and that they were, I guess, venting their anxieties out on society, and we were there to stop them. But when we had to obey lawful commands from our superiors to clear the streets, we did it, usually fast and efficiently and effectively.
We were provocative. There's no question we were provocative. But again, our provocation was with a purpose. We thought that we were being provocative in order to expose the true nature of the convention and of the police and of the army. We didn't want that true nature to go unnoticed.
The fighting was becoming a nightly ritual, and the park was turning into a war zone.
The first thing that would occur would be these great cannons that would billow tear gas into the park. You get this kind of eerie, ghost-like radiance coming through the mist. And then out of this fog would come these men in helmets and slapping their nightsticks against their hand, and these eerie masks to protect themselves from the gas. You just felt like you were in a science fiction movie.
The toll it takes on your body is unreal. You've got to build yourself up to where you think you've got enough guts to go into the riots. And then after it's through, a lot of times I went home and I had a stiff drink and pegs of cigarettes just to come down. And then you go to bed after a couple of hours, try to get some sleep. You generally couldn't sleep. You'd wake up the next morning or the next afternoon like a truck hit you, and then it was time to go right back in. You're so nervous. You're wondering when you're going to get hurt. You don't know if somebody's going to throw a brick at you or a Molotov cocktail or human excrement, which they threw at us. You just don't know. One particular hippie that got knocked down started hollering, "Medic, medic," and it seemed like in the middle of a riot, the whole riot stopped. Two hippies with armbands, with crosses on their arms for armbands, came out, ran to this guy, picked him up. We all stood there and watched, took him off to the side, and then the riot continued.
At the same time, at the Bandshell in Grant Park, 15,000 people had gathered for a rally that the city had grudgingly authorized. But the legality of the gathering did nothing to reassure the police.
There was a group of policemen, and they were in a fighting mood by then. I noticed their gloves, and there's a type of glove that they fill with shot. Birdshot, and it makes makes a punch be a very damaging thing. And I yelled at them, and I talked to their commander and told them to make these guys drop these things. And they did. They put them all on the ground when I told them to. But it was that same group that about an hour later went sailing into the crowd.
As the rally got underway, a teenage boy climbed the flagpole near the Bandshell and lowered the American flag.
The police see this terrible thing that's happening to the American flag, and they decided to come in and make an arrest. And as they arrest, they blow the crowd away that's around the flagpole and move in with great force and pull this person out.
The arrest riled the crowd.
Get a picture throwing the rocks. Go on.
The protest organizers felt they were losing control.
Sit down. All right, the marshals are going to the point. Everyone else.
I told people, sit down, don't throw anything. That's exactly what they want. They want to start a riot.
They are provoking us, but we do not want to confront them now. Move back, please.
To prevent a confrontation, Rennie Davis rushed over to set up a line of marshals between the police and the restless demonstrators.
And then I turned with a bullhorn to face the police and acknowledged that we have a permit for this and we're asking the police to withdraw to relieve the tension. Well, that just really set everything off.
Here they come.
As they approached me, many policemen shouting, really, "Kill Davis." And it had that word kill had a certain ring to it that was not just a slogan.
The police targeted Davis and beat him unconscious.
And then all hell broke loose. The police started marching into the crowd, but they were marching in phalanx and simply beating up or beating back anybody that was in their way.
This assault in broad daylight was a turning point. 4 days of running battle had fractured the protest leadership. David Dellinger believed in the symbolic power of a peaceful march to the amphitheater. He never wavered in his commitment to nonviolence. But Tom Hayden was abandoning that position and now urged guerrilla tactics in the streets.
The people are going to line up to try to march out, and at that point they're going to be tight enough on this side for us to come in and start just telling them in small numbers to move to the loop.
I was trying to keep my head while I was going out of my mind. I was reacting to the fact that Rennie was down bleeding somewhere, that I thought Dave was leading us in his good-natured way into a deadly trap where we would all be arrested.
As Dellinger tried to calm the crowd, Hayden confronted him.
He came up and said, "We are taking over the platform and the microphone now because the police have done these terrible things, and you kept calling for nonviolence, and that's not realistic." Finally, I looked him in the eye and said, "That's not true. I'm not giving up the microphone."
Tom Hayden grabs the microphone away from Dave Dellinger. In a kind of passionate anger, he tells the audience, "Listen, if blood is going to flow, let it flow all over this city."